Hello lovelies, and welcome to a new episode of Real Nightmares, where we watch horror movies that are based on a true story and compare them to the real horrors they're inspired by. I'm Katie Adkins, or Heart Scale. A couple of you asked for it and I'm delivering. We're gonna be covering The Conjuring today. I'm a big James Wan fan, and this was the first movie of his that I ever saw. I was 21 and drunk in the movie theater, and to say I was terrified is an understatement. What's weird about this movie and I's relationship, though, is that even though I've seen it multiple times, I can never seem to remember what happens in it. It's the weirdest thing. I know I've seen it, and then a few years pass, and I'm like, what happened in the movie? It was a haunted house, right? Like, that's all I ever seem to remember. That and some of the characters, and that's about it. But I always remember that it was good and that it was scary. Do you guys have movies like that? Where a year passes and you know you remember liking it, but you can't seem to remember the full plot? Well, to refresh my and your memories, here is the plot of the 2013's The Conjuring. Based on the real-life cases of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, we begin with their 1968 case, Annabelle the Doll, where supposedly a little girl named Annabelle Higgins is possessing this insane-looking doll and harassing these two young nurses. Yes, Annabelle the Doll is based on a true story, and we're going to be covering that in a future video because she got her own movie, so we're just going to fast forward through this part. We cut to Lorraine, a skilled medium, and her husband Ed, a demonologist, teaching a seminar on paranormal investigations to college students.
What do people call you?
Well, we've been called demonologists, ghost hunters, paranormal researchers.
Kooks.
But they renounce these exotic titles and humble us by just wanting to be known as Ed and Lorraine Warren. Since the 1960s, Ed and Lorraine Warren have been known as the world's most renowned paranormal investigators. Lorraine is a gifted clairvoyant, while Ed is the only non-ordained demonologist recognized by the Catholic Church. Out of the thousands of cases throughout their controversial careers, there is one case so malevolent, they've kept it locked away until now. Based on the true story, The Conjuring. To keep this video on track, we're only going to be covering the Perron family haunting and not delve into all of the personal parts about the Warrens' life. I'm going to give Ed and Lorraine Warren their own deep dive video in the future where I'll cover all of their real life, their cases, and how they're portrayed in films. So don't at me on that, okay? 1971. Harrisville, Rhode Island. The Perron family, with 5 daughters, move into a large farm-style house. Sadie the dog being the only one capable of seeing how creepy this house is. Like, look at those walls. It looks like the house is gonna fall apart at literally any moment. This is your trigger warning now that the dog is not gonna be okay. Immediately, April, the youngest daughter, finds a circus-themed music box. I would give them shit for playing hide and clap, a Marco Polo style of hide and seek, because of how scary that must be, but as a kid, my friends and I used to play hide and go seek in the dark in my friend's dark, windowless basement. And we didn't even use clap cues to find each other. We would just search for each other blind in the dark in pure silence. Imagine you're hiding and you just hear something coming towards you and just touch you. Yeah, that's how we played hide and seek because we were normal children. Yeah. They find a little secret hidey hole in the closet that leads to a secret cellar.
You still too fried to christen the new house?
Truly, only a couple with 5+ children has this level of stamina. The house is freezing, and the oldest daughter, Andrea, complains her room at night smells like something died. Roger discovers there's an entire antique store in their basement.
What are we gonna do with all this stuff?
Have an estate sale? Do you know how much that piano would sell for?
There might be some antiques down here worth a lot of money.
Yeah, just a lot of junk the previous owner didn't want.
A 2024 couple would never. Holy shit, babe. Fire up Facebook Marketplace. We're rich. Carolyn notices the clocks all mysteriously stopped at 3:07.
Mommy, where's Sadie?
I think we know where Sadie is. Cut to Monroe, Connecticut, the Warrens' house. So there is more than one haunting in Connecticut. Okay. Ed shows off his haunted and possessed items collection, and immediately I want to know, what's the story behind these guys? Haunted birds? The Annabelle doll gets her own special display case, and I'm getting ahead of myself. We will cover the Annabelle story and the Warrens in 2 other videos. For now, we're just focusing on the Perron family. The witching hour is upon us yet again. Cindy sleepwalks into Andrea's room and in general is just really creepy, banging on the vintage wardrobe. The older girls go to school, leaving little April behind with her new imaginary friend Rory and her mom to play a wholesome game of hide and clap.
Give me the 3rd clap.
It's terrifying. The hauntings escalate around the house. Carolyn gets bruises, ghosts play footsie with Christine, doors slam and rattle, pictures fall, birds hit the house and die, no one wants to play catch anymore, light bulbs burst, clapping. But the worst one is this one. That one, I remember that one, and that one does get me every time, and I hate it every time. Father comes home to a terrified house. It's officially time to hire the Warrens for their services. Not only was the house built in 1863, haunted with multiple spirits, there is one super evil demonic spirit, Bathsheba.
She's related to Marytown Esty. She's one of the women accused of witchcraft in Salem. She was hung during the trials.
Bathsheba's husband caught her sacrificing their 7-day-old baby. She ran out back, climbed the big tree, proclaimed her love to Satan, and cursed anyone who tried to take her land, and hung herself. Time of death was 307. Doesn't stop there. A new family moved into the house in 1930s. A woman and her son Rory, who mysteriously disappeared, and then she killed herself in the cellar. The original 200-acre land was divided up into a subdivision, and people throughout have been mysteriously dying and committing suicide. Even worse, leaving the house won't save the Perrons. The entity has latched itself onto the family. Time to give the house a good old-fashioned exorcism. But first they have to collect evidence to get the approval from the church. So it's time to bring in the big boys.
Ghosts can't hurt you. Most of the time.
Just when everyone feels safe, Carolyn takes a nap and bing, bang, boom, she's possessed. Cindy has another sleepwalking episode and we uncover more secrets.
That's where Rory hides when he's afraid.
I feel for Cindy too, because I too suffered from sleepwalking as a kid and just how unintentionally creepy you are when you do it. I only ever woke up once. I was about 7 or 8 and I was standing at the foot of my parents' bed and I had one hand on it and one knee up, like as if I was about to climb up onto the bed like some sort of sleep paralysis demon. I cannot imagine how terrifying that must have looked from my parents' perspective. I should never procreate. Lorraine suffers a terrible fall, which was much funnier when it happened to my mom, when she fell through the ceiling of our attic. Her body, she stopped halfway through, so her little legs were just dangling there. And I just remember walking in, just being like, this is surreal, not processing what I'm looking at. And her being like, can you help me? That's exactly what she sounds like. Can you help me? She's gonna watch this and she's gonna hate it. We meet Rory's mom, can't say she's too hospitable, and learn the reason Rory's mother killed him in the 1930s is because she was possessed by the ghost of Bathsheba from the 1890s. And now, Bathsheba is trying to possess Carolyn to then kill one of her own children. Rory tries to help the kids by showing him his hiding spots. And oops, the spirit of Bathsheba now has Lorraine's necklace gifted to her by her daughter Judy. You keeping up? So now Lorraine's daughter Judy is in danger from Bathsheba because she has one of Lorraine's personal possessions. Keep up, keeping up, we're keeping up. We get our proof to send to the church to get an exorcism approved. Some side plot about the spirit threatening to hurt Judy happens.
Hi, welcome to Chili's.
And we get back to the Perrons. Possessed Carolyn leaves with Christine and April to take them back to the house to, well, sacrifice them. They find Carolyn and Christine, but where's April? Carolyn goes berserk and they tie her up. No time to wait on a priest. Ed decides now's as good time as any for a good old-fashioned exorcism. The local birds are not a fan. Things escalate. And this dumbass gives April's hiding spot away. But through the power of happy memories and motherly love, Carolyn overcomes Bathsheba. April is gonna need a lot of therapy when she gets older. Christine too. Everyone's alive! No more possession. The Perrons rejoice. Lorraine gets her necklace back and the Warrens go back home to their spooky museum. On to the next job. Diabolical forces are formidable. These forces are eternal and they exist today. The fairy tale is true. The devil exists, God exists, and for us as people, our very destiny hinges upon which one we elect to follow. Ed Warren. Do you think like all the ghosts and cursed objects in this room like talk to each other? Ending slide show of, oh my god, they're real! It's real! Great movie. I love this movie, actually. It's pretty scary. As far as haunted house movies go, it's easily one of the best. It's so good that my brain erases it from my memory so that I can rewatch it for the first time again and again and again and again. All right, so let's get straight to it. How much of this was real? The Arnold estate is 200 acres of land, a 9-room farmhouse with a barn on the premises. The house fully finishing construction in 1736, but the construction of the house began in 1693. The Arnold family lived there for a couple of generations. It is located in the village of Harrisville, which is in the city of Burrillville, Rhode Island. Think of it like a suburb. Like if you lived in New York City, you'd say you live in New York, but like you live in Brooklyn. You live in Burrillville, but you live in Harrisville, in Burrillville. In 1970, Carolyn and Roger Perron purchased the Arnold estate and moved in 1971 with their 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cynthia, Cindy, and April. Nearly everyone in the house claims to experience something supernatural, but it's inconsistent whether or not the spirits in the house are good or evil. Andrea, the eldest daughter, wrote a book series about the family's experience in the house called House of Darkness, House of Light, published in 2011. The movie The Conjuring is actually based off of these books, which are based on the Perrons' real-life experiences. The Perrons were even interviewed about their experiences when doing research for the movie. First, we're gonna go over Carolyn. Carolyn's first negative experience in the house is in the barn of February 1971. She was struck on the shoulder by a hand scythe. She was the only one on the property that day aside from April, who was an infant at the time sleeping in the house. That same night, she discovered strands of Cindy's hair turning white, which was very odd considering Cindy was only 8 at the time. Cindy also told Carolyn that her bed was moving every night and making it difficult for her to sleep. Carolyn experienced hauntings worse than anyone else in the house. It was as if the spirit only wanted her to leave and wanted everyone else to stay. Like as if the spirit wanted to be everyone else's mom and saw Carolyn as a threat. She went from looking very vibrant and healthy to looking tired and dull, and she lost a lot of weight in a very short amount of time. Over time, her voice changed, she started talking differently, and she also started wearing vintage clothing and styling herself like someone from the past. Roger. Roger didn't seem to fear the farmhouse at all, even though he was well aware and believed the house was haunted. It took a while for him to get on board that it was haunted, especially since he was away for work a lot. He traveled constantly for work and wasn't really home a lot. A lot of the times it was just Carolyn and the girls. He stated that every time he went into the cellar, he was met by a presence of a friendly old woman. He couldn't see her, but he could feel her presence, and she would even touch him. One time when he was alone in the house, she manifested as a cloud. And he yelled, "Look, you old witch, either come sit down and talk to me or just get the hell out." The door to the cellar slammed shut and she didn't interact with him again for another 6 months. When Carolyn confronted him about wanting to move and sell the house since the spirits were terrorizing her, he said, "We can't sell the house. We just moved here and the housing market is crashing. I can barely afford gas to make a work trip." Andrea, the author of the book series about her family's experience, stated that she was only terrified of her own well-being once while living on the farm, but for the most part felt the spirits were harmless. She felt she was somehow less at risk from the more sinister spirits in the house than maybe some of her other family members, particularly her mother, Nancy. Nancy stated that she did immediately notice a presence after moving in, but felt as though it was just excited or intrigued about the new family moving in, so she didn't feel afraid of it at all. One day, her and her neighbor / best friend, Katie Maza, witnessed the phone lift off of the receiver, hover in the air, gently return to the phone cradle. Nancy recalls that doors would commonly open and close on their own, and she would hear phantom footsteps. toys would move around on their own, and her bed would vibrate and lift every night. She also claimed that rooms would get very cold, and she could tell if spirits were nearby because it would smell like rotting corpses. Nancy and Katie both became oddly attached to the house. Years after the Perrons left the house, Katie purchased the Arnold estate and moved in with her husband and baby. Within days, strange things started happening that she called Nancy about. The worst event being all of the black flies everywhere. Nancy came over to investigate since her family also dealt with a fly problem while living there, but this time the swarm was so thick that they had to be wiped away to be able to see out the windows. I can't even imagine. Katie and Nancy returned to the house on Halloween 1996 to visit, and both experienced the sensation of being touched and heard a woman say, "Oh my God, it's you! You're back!" Christine. In the books, Christine refused to discuss negative aspects of living in the house. Only details she was willing to share is it is absolutely freezing in winter, and she remains terrified of the cellar door to this day. However, in the docuseries Bathsheba, Search for Evil, Christine says she did hear the cries of a little girl calling for her mom. Cindy. Cindy and Nancy saw a man in old-timey clothing when they first moved into the house. He was translucent at first before disappearing. Cindy attempted to banish the spirits herself with her friend Lori, which resulted in them being trapped in the boarding room with a mannequin that came to life and threw its own body parts at them. When the limbs would hit the ground, they flopped like a fish out of water, which just sounds like a scene from Silent Hill. Despite everyone being home, only Nancy heard their screams that day. Cindy also claims that she felt protected in the home, even when she would play with a Ouija board, which she sometimes did, and even when she tried to do the banishing seance. She believes this protective force is feminine and was more powerful than the evil spirits in the home, and it smelled like flowers and fruit. She feels they are each other's guardian angels. She says the way spirits talk to them wasn't like physically hearing them, but more like thoughts were being projected into your head, and you would hear them in your head, not like physically or audibly. And they told her that there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall of the home. And while they never found this, she does believe them.
I have every reason to believe that there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall, and it's probably in the wall right out behind this house.
April. April became friends with a spirit named Oliver, whom she used to play with in the chimney closet. She remembers him to be a sad little boy. When researching the property, the family found a story about a boy who drowned in the river. His father attempted to rescue him, but also perished trying to save him. She believes Oliver to be the spirit of the little boy who drowned. She also experienced the rotting smells of death and claims that she will never ever enter the farmhouse ever again unless she is with a sister or someone she deeply trusts. In 1973, ghost hunters and demonologists, twin brothers Carl and Keith Johnson, showed up on the property to investigate. Carolyn and Roger asked what they were doing there, confused. Keith said, "We're here because you called us. Your house is haunted?" What's odd about this is, as far as Carolyn and Roger know, nobody called them. They didn't call them. But Keith insists that it was Carolyn herself who called for help. And she might have, but she has no memory of it. The hauntings were so strong that they decided to bring in Ed and Lorraine Warren. When Lorraine walked into the home, she said, "I sense a malignant presence in this house. Her name is Bathsheba." Lorraine fully blamed all of the negative hauntings on Bathsheba and stated that she was targeting Carolyn. They convinced the family they needed to do some sort of seance to banish the evil spirits, and during this is when Carolyn was possessed by something. She was making noises that didn't sound human, and her chair floated up and flew into the living room, and her body fell, hitting her head hard on the floor. She survived, but everyone panicked at first, scared that she might not have made it, because her skull made a very loud clack on the floor. The Warrens did not successfully cleanse the home. They claimed it was the most haunted house that they had ever investigated. The Perron family finally sold the house in 1980. They lived there for 10 years. So who is Bathsheba? And why did Lorraine immediately pull that name out of the ether? Bathsheba Sherman and her son, Herbert Sherman, lived on the Sherman farm about a mile away from the Arnold estate in the late 1880s. There was no murder-suicide, though. Both Bathsheba and Herbert died of natural causes. Bathsheba died in 1883 at 73 years old, and Herman passed 18 years later in his 50s. There are various rumors about when she was alive that she was a Satanist and was somehow involved with the death of a neighboring child. Another states she killed a baby using a sewing needle. Andrea addresses in interviews that we don't fully know if Bathsheba was a practicing witch who sacrificed a baby to Satan for eternal youth. Apparently the whole thing was an eternal youth shenanigan. Andrea also states that she doesn't believe Bathsheba was the spirit in the home who was wreaking havoc. She speculates that it might have been Mrs. John Arnold, the original mistress of the house. And this is who Carolyn and Roger believe was harassing Carolyn. In Andrea's book, she states that Mrs. John Arnold committed suicide by hanging in the barn at the age of 93 in 1866. I thought it was weird that a 93-year-old woman would hang herself. I feel like you made it that far, you might as well wait it out, see how far you can go. Something about it felt incorrect, so me being the psycho that I am decided to dive even deeper. And that's when I found The Black Book of Burrillville, a book listing the history of unusual deaths in the town of Burrillville, such as murders, suicides, freak accidents, etc. According to this book, a Mrs. John Arnold committed suicide. It turns out there were two women in the town married to a John Arnold, making both of them Mrs. John Arnold at the same time. This was during the same lifetime. Therefore, two Mrs. John Arnolds living in Burrillville in the mid-1800s. Abigail Cook Arnold and Susan Arnold. Abigail Cook Arnold lived on the Arnold estate, our Conjuring house, and died of natural causes in 1869 at 93 years old. Susan Arnold, who did not live in the farmhouse but did live in Burrillville at the age of 50, committed suicide by hanging in the attic of her home. This is most likely the Mrs. Arnold who committed suicide by hanging that she found when Andrea did her research, that Andrea talks about in her book, thinking it was the other Mrs. John Arnold who lived in the farmhouse. However, I will give them this. When the writers of The Conjuring conducted their interviews and were doing their research, their belief at the time was that the Mrs. John Arnold who committed suicide by hanging was in fact the one who lived in the farmhouse. They didn't know that it was a mix-up. And they believe that this happened in the barn. And with all of these ghosts that seem to be within the home, there also seems to be a belief that not all of these souls necessarily died in the home. So if we go off of this logic that if you just die within the town or kind of around, you're still capable of haunting this house. Like maybe this house just has such a strong aura and energy that these ghosts just sort of gravitate towards it. If we go with the logic that dying in the town is good enough for this house to be haunted with all of these spirits, we can suspend our disbelief that Susan Arnold, who did commit suicide by hanging, and Bathsheba, who was accused of being a witch during her lifetime, are haunting this house. We're just gonna go ahead and just believe that's the case for the sake of this video. So let's tally up the similarities. The Perron family of 7 moves into a big farmhouse in 1970. The house is haunted with good spirits and bad spirits. Hauntings include beds moving, freezing temps, rotting smells, toys moving, seeing translucent people, doors opening and closing. There's a creepy cellar. April did befriend a little ghost boy. A woman did commit suicide by hanging. Ed and Lorraine Warren did investigate the house, and Lorraine sensed Bathsheba that she was the evil spirit in the home. The malignant spirit was targeting Carolyn. There was a spirit named Bathsheba who in life was accused of being a witch and rumored to have killed a child. Now if Bathsheba is the evil spirit, that's up for debate. A ritual was performed to cleanse the house of evil spirits. This causes Carolyn to be possessed by an evil spirit, and it almost resulted in Carolyn's death. Call me shocked, but I think I have to say that The Conjuring is based on a true story. It's not a perfect retelling. They definitely took some liberties, but there are enough similarities that I think it is okay to say it is based off of it. If you're gonna make your movie based on a true story, it should at least resemble the source material, and I believe this movie does. This is our, second one now? Out of 8 episodes now, I think? The first one being The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Who knew these possession movies were accurate to their source material? Now, this is, of course, if we go with the belief that the Perrons' story is true. We're just gonna use their books, interviews, and essays as fact for the purpose of this video. Please let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any additional information to add, please keep suggesting more horror movies that are based on a true story for me to cover, and keep it creepy.